welcome to another installment of the Fragments of Silicon reviews. Four reviews up this week. The first of which is Streets of Rage 4. Right. So first of all, if you're new to the broadcast, if this is like the first thing you're watching, or if you might be the developers or the publisher or whatever, and you might be wondering, hey, why is an older Streets of Rage game being broadcast instead of Streets of Rage 4? That has to do with our setup. Like I'm usually the one who's hosting the actual show and don't really have the, it's like it's hard to play a game and focus on the actual like reviews and doing the show. So duties are split up. Petty Fan's the one who's actually playing the games, and he does not have a Streets of Rage 4 code. He has classic Streets of Rage, as you can see, but Streets of Rage 4 was played by me and me only, which is a bit of a problem in its own right because we were unable to test the online multiplayer functionality of the game. Though that's probably kind of a side benefit to the whole thing. But from the coverage I've seen elsewhere, doesn't look like a whole lot of people went into Streets of Rage 4 online multiplayer. A lot of that probably also had to do with the fact that the game released only a couple days ago, as of this recording. But anyway, so Streets of Rage 4. As you might be able to discern from the title, it is the fourth Streets of Rage. And unlike...
Really? There haven't been like a Streets of Rage Tokyo Drift or Streets of Rage insert other non-numbered thing that still takes up a slot?
Yeah, thankfully, no.
Indeed.
This is the legit fourth Streets of Rage game. There were attempts at trying to do a Streets of Rage 4 here or there in the intervening like 2 or so decades between releases, but like the closest that came out was eventually retitled Fighting Force. We covered this back in our interview with the developers of the game in September. But yeah, this is the legit Streets of Rage 4. And this pleases me. Because Streets of Rage is one of my favorite, if not my favorite, brawling series of all time. Maybe Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles supplants that on the day, but Streets of Rage has always been up there. In terms of just, you want to name the best brawlers, 2 in particular comes up, or the Japanese Bare Knuckle 3. There's a whole story behind that that's kind of beyond, the review of Streets of Rage 4. But suffice to say, Streets of Rage 4 comes, a good 20, 25 years after the last release. And I'm really pleased to say I'm glad it came out in the here and now. It got developed by people who love Streets of Rage, who get Streets of Rage. Because, goddamn, this was like stepping into Streets of Rage. It didn't miss a beat. It's like, I played like the old characters, Blaze and Axel, and they played like their 90s counterparts. Like, they don't necessarily look like their 90s counterparts, and that's been a bone of contention during the whole development process. A significant contingent of fans did not care for the art style that Streets of Rage 4 garnered. Like, people wanted a more retro look. They wanted, Streets of Rage to continue to look like it was from the 90s. And, I guess that's a subjective thing, but personally, I'm glad that they went with the high-def, modern-day aesthetics, while still harking back to the 90s. It's got the artistic flourishes there, not just in the graphics, though we'll get to the music in a bit, but also, it looks modern. But it plays like the Streets of Rage games of old, for the most part. They have made some changes, like the most curious of which is the level structure. Like they've added a brand new level structure that I don't think I've ever seen in a brawler before. I'm honestly not sure how I feel about it because it's different. I'll give it that. So instead of playing a brawler front to back like in one setting like you would, the game is split up into 12 distinct stages. Each stage is kind of their self-contained thing. That is to say, when you start a stage, you start with no score and 2 lives. None of your score and lives transfer over stages, which could be a good or bad thing. Plus, this has a modern save system, so if you get to level 5 or level 7, and you want to quit, you can do that, without worrying about picking up. At least in the main mode. There is an additional what they call arcade mode, but that's not accurate. Arcade mode is the front to back, classic brawler structure. You get lives, you get 5 lives, which was classic Streets of Rage. But the thing is, you don't get any continues, and that's where I have the problem of using the word arcade mode, because if you've ever played an arcade brawler, you got unlimited continues. You just had to plunk in the quarters.
Yeah, I was going to say, unlimited asterisk if you have infinite quarters.
Yeah, so this is actually 1cc mode. You get 5 lives, you can get extra lives, but you don't get any continues. So that's the rub. Like, that's basically expert mode. And, that comes with the 4 difficulties. It's got easy, normal, hard, and insane difficulties. And another more subtle change, but it is there, the game's been beefed up in terms of difficulty. Like, there were mooks there, like fucking Donovan there. He's a lot more difficult in Streets of Rage 4. It's kind of surprising when you're expecting some of these guys to be, their usual lame-ass selves. That being said, Streets of Rage 4 isn't overly hard, at least on, like, normal difficulty. It'll kick your ass, but I don't recall ever, like, losing all of my lives during a normal playthrough. And the main campaign's pretty beefy. Took me a couple hours, I'd say 4 or 5 hours, to complete the campaign. Which is pretty beefy for a straight brawling game. It's not like River City Ransom or something in that vein where it's a hybrid, maybe brawler RPG kind of thing going on here, persistent world. But yeah, I'll be honest, this was an amazing game. Surpassed my expectations, and I don't say that about a lot of games, in case you've been listening for a long time. All right, the other big change, and the one I liked, was they made special moves less bullshit. So how in your typical brawler you'll have your attack, your jump, and your special attack, and when you do the special attack, it'll drain some health. So Street Rage 4 does that, but it adds a twist that it's so genius. I'm shocked that, I'm not saying that this is the first game that ever thought of it, but it's the first game I played that thought of it. What it does is, it does deplete your health, but if you continue to punch the baddies or whatever, you can get that health back. The trick is if you get hit by the enemy, you lose that health. So there's a bit more risk-reward going on there than, just, oh, hey, I have to use the super attack and lose a small chunk of the health. Honestly, that was something that always kept me from using special attacks, because I didn't like using an attack that drained my health.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe call that personal preference, but I just don't like that. It's a mechanic. I get why you did that. It's to make sure that you don't spam the attack. But, here you can spam the attack, so to speak, if you're good enough to spam it. If you're not, well, you're going to get pummeled nonetheless and, lose all your health. And scoring has been updated as well. It's like instead of, what you see here, which is pretty typical brawler scoring mechanics, this one goes deep into combos or, number of hits specifically. And it doesn't really, you can use any kind of, punches, throws. As long as you're doing damage to the enemy, you're landing hits. You're getting a higher combo. And that plays into the scoring. And you need to use some of the special moves to keep your scoring going into the upper echelons. Like, a lot of your dash specials hit enemies that are on the ground. And because sometimes if if an enemy's on the ground and there's nobody else to punch, your combo meter is going to time out. And once again, the combo meter works like the specials meter. Higher the risk, higher the reward. It all works pretty fantastically. Like I said, the only thing I wasn't a particularly big fan of was the level design change, but it's livable. And let's see. In terms of plot, well, it's a pretty typical Streets of Rage plot. It's like things are going bad in the city. It's like two of the original crew has assembled with two characters that have a connection to two of the past characters, and they all bring their various strengths and weaknesses. Like Axel here, he's his typical Mario self, the all-around average guy, no particular weaknesses, no particular strengths. Blaze is back as well, and she plays about the same as before. They did downgrade her a bit because of how weapons work in the. Actually, now that I think of it, the weapon system is probably my least favorite change because, instead of how it usually works in brawlers, you have a weapon, you use it until it gets knocked out of your hand a few times. Well, this time
or it breaks or whatever.
Well, that's the thing. All of the weapons break, no matter what, which is a change from Streets of Rage games in the past. They didn't break beforehand. Also, the knife handles differently. That's the part that got a downgrade because Blaze was really good with the knife. She got 2 attacks with it. That has been changed. She only gets 1 attack with the knife. And honestly, the knife is so useless in this game. It's better used as a projectile.
Like in Castlevania.
Honestly, I've always found the weapons to be a bit shit in Streets of Rage. It was usually better to not use them because, they are limited. Now, there are changes depending on the character that you use. Axel's much better with steel pipes than, say, Blaze is. He's much faster with it because he's got more upper arm strength. I like that bit. Maybe a bit more annoyingly, that the only character who can dash is Cherry, who's the daughter of Skate here. And the thing of it is, she's the fast one. That was the thing that was done to make her distinct, which is, I guess, all right in and of itself, but kind of sucks when your character only has casual jaunt as their speed.
Yeah, the problem with making a character the fast one as their special thing is that sort of automatically makes all the other characters the slow one.
Uh-huh.
And that's never actually fun to play.
Right. Maybe that should have been restricted to God, I forgot his name offhand, but the big guy. Sorry, I'm gonna have to look this up because he was the character I used the least. I hate it when I have the wrong. God, come on, Wikipedia. Jesus. Anyway, yeah, the big guy plays like a big guy should. He's very slow, but he's very strong. He's the strong character. Yeah, that's the guy. Like I said, he was the character I kind of didn't pay attention to. I know, the big slow guys are usually not my go-to. because it's that slow part that I don't like.
Yeah, unless their attacks are literally significantly stronger.
Yeah, Floyd, who is the apprentice of Dr. Zan. Like, I'll admit, I kind of liked using him in Streets of Rage 3 just because he was so different. And but that was more the exception than the rule. Um, mind you, you do unlock a fifth character um, during the main campaign. Can't talk about him because no embargo right now. The game's out, but that's just more of a spoiler. I suppose what I can mention is like the other unlocks, the other major unlocks are the classic skins. Like each of the Streets of Rage, the classic Streets of Rage characters have classic skins based off both, all three of the past games that you get as rewards for your overall score. See, like instead of getting a high score throughout the entire game, you have an overall score, which adds up and unlocks these skins. Let's see. There was also a one-on-one fighting mode, like think the original Double Dragon on NES. Once again, I didn't have the chance to play that because that required two people. I think that was local only. Speaking of multiplayer, local co-op is 4-player. Online multiplayer is 2-player. There have been some people grumbling about that. They're probably wondering why the online co-op was restricted to 2-player. Well, it has to do with the nature of the game. Like
also, yeah, the more places you're trying to sync, the harder you're gonna have getting good performance.
Right. And I'm willing to bet it was kind of a hard job getting 2-player co-op working well enough. Like the thing with 2D games is they're a lot harder to do multiplayer for than you think. Like this is like one of the biggest misconceptions I've seen when it comes to gaming. They think like just because a 2D platformer is a lot simpler than say a FPS, that it's easier to do online multiplayer. I'm like, it's not.
The graphics might be simpler, but the syncing is much more precise.
Right. That's the trick. You need a high ping to maintain a stable frame rate.
Low ping, actually.
Sorry, yeah. Not got my terms confused there.
You need a good ping.
Yeah, there we go.
Yeah.
Not sure why I got that confused. Anyway, like if you played the initial version of Super Mario Maker 2, like, you remember the problems that thing had? Yeah, that's the reason. So why, while we can't adequately cover that particular aspect of the game, I can say it wasn't easy. Like not in the way that people usually think of that. Like, so, like be glad it's there at all. And the local co-op, I'm willing to bet it probably works best on like the Nintendo Switch. But didn't review the Switch version either. In fact, like I don't think anyone had Switch codes until like the day of release or something like that. I know PC and PlayStation 4 codes went out first, and Xbox One and Switch codes went out later. I reviewed the PC. I'm reviewing the PC Steam version, which is usually the version we cover, but not always. It's like if you want more technical details, I'd recommend like watching the Digital Foundry videos on Streets of Rage 4.
Mm-hmm.
We usually don't focus on that kind of thing. Like we mainly due to the like we don't have the capacity to do that kind of side by side at this moment in time. But even if like there are other things we like to focus on rather than the pure technical side of things. Let's see. The music, once again, the music is pretty outstanding. kind of a murderer's row of soundtrack composers here. Um, God, it's like Yuzo Koshiro, who composed the original Streets of Rage games, is back, though he's like one of the side composers. Um, the main composer is actually a French guy named Olivier Derave. I'm probably butchering that. But he's a French video game composer, which makes sense because this game was actually primarily developed in France. But he did things like the Alone in Dark, reboot soundtrack, Obscure, and Remember Me. So he's got some work behind him in his own right. But it's like really the soundtrack was kind of sold on like all of the old Sega artists coming back. Not just like Yuzo Koshiro, but Yoko Shimomura, Keiji Yamagashi. Yeah, I know. Pronouncing foreign words and names, not my specialty, but sometimes you got to soldier on. Motohiro Kawashima and Harayumi Fujita. It's like just like a whole bunch of video game composing talent assigned and assembled into one brawler here. And did they pull off the trick? Yes, they did. Like, they really nailed the sound of Streets of Rage. And once again, bringing it back into the modern context. And, there are some remixes, but there's some new tracks as well. And, it all sounds like early 90s house music, which is how Streets of Rage should sound. Once again, this is a big reason why I'm glad that we got Streets of Rage 4 now, and not like we got some shitty 3D reboot in the fucking late 2000s.
Mm-hmm.
Otherwise it's known as being Final Fight Streetwised. No, seriously, fuck that game. Like, fuck everything about that game. Look, it spits in the face of fucking Final Fight. It's one of those just fucking hell did you piss on a legacy here. Granted, it was an overrated legacy. I think Final Fight was an okay brawler, not one of the all-time greats, but it's one of the more popular ones. But that's neither here nor there. Streets of Rage 4 is a tremendous package. And that gets to pricing. And that will factor into the recommendation here because as much as I like Streets of Rage 4, an actual recommend here is, kind of what you're looking for. Because, okay, first of all, this game is clocking in at $25. In terms of how much does a game cost, like, the effort's on display there. But, not going to lie, that's a bit on the higher end of indie game pricing. Typical pricing is going to be like, for a higher end indie game is $15, $20. It's only $5 more, but that's not why I'm actually hesitant to recommend this game. It's because as good as it is, and it's got a lot of nods to the past, but it's a fucking brawler. It's not, it's not like Gundam the Origin or, Gundam Unicorn, where if you don't know like 3 fucking series in a movie, you're fucking lost.
And even then you're lost.
You have to understand people punching each other.
Yes. I'm like, it's not a grand continuity lockout. It's you're a guy or a girl and you punch people to save the city. That's about it in terms of a basic plot structure.
There are three. You have rage.
Yes. No, the problem is at the end of the day, this is still a brawler. The main campaign can be beat in a few hours, and yes, there is replay value. There's getting higher scores. There's doing the 1cc mode. There's playing the game and then there's mastering the game. And there are going to be people who are going to play through like with all the characters, with all the skins, and all that stuff. But it's On the other hand, it's a brawler. It only lasts a few hours. And then you're probably going to put it down. Maybe you'll pick it back up, but it's not something that has a lot of immediacy in its replay value. Or maybe it does, depending on how much you enjoy this. And that's kind of the thorny issue here. It's how much do you like a game that only lasts a couple hours? Is that worth $25? Because on a objective measure, I can heartily recommend this game. It's my game of the year so far. But that's because I'm a huge fan of Streets of Rage, as I've mentioned before. But you may be a more fair weather brawling game fan, and $25 is a bit much. And mind you, that's just the digital price. It's going to have a physical release, although that's from limited run. So, better be there for the pre-order window or it's gone.
Look, and even then, it might still be gone.
Yeah. Look, I like what they do. I just don't like the limited part.
Mm.
Well, I mean, the limited thing, I think, is how they afford it.
I know. Look, we've had them on the show. I'm just saying, like, the gap is so fucking small.
Why can't there be more people who'd be willing to pay exorbitant funds for physical versions?
It's a catch.
Is really our complaint.
Also worth mentioning, the soundtrack is not available on Steam. Probably because this is getting a vinyl release from Brainwave. They're the studio that actually got all the music talent together, and we've kind of had them on their show. Like one of the indie devs that we interviewed a few years ago actually works at Brainwave, as well as their indie studio. But it's like it's a great soundtrack, but you're not going to be able to buy it off of Steam right now. That may change in the future. I hope it does. I'm willing to bet, though, if we do get musical DLC, it's probably going to be on the expensive end, like at least $10, maybe $15, maybe $20. Like I said, there's a lot of musical talent here. There's a lot of music here. This was probably not the cheapest thing in terms of music to assemble. So yeah, Streets of Rage 4, kind of a complicated recommendation here. But ultimately, I can say, even if you're a fair weather brawling fan, it's worth it. And if you are a fan of brawlers, definitely, like, you probably already bought this game, unless you had that big of a hang on the art style. At least that's what I've seen elsewhere on the internet. But yeah, in terms of arbitrary score of arbitration, I'd say a 9.5. Like I said, this is the most pleased I've been with a game that I've had to review in a good long while. And yeah, if it's not my game of the year, it's probably going to be top 3, top 5 at least. And yeah, highest recommendation in general. So with that in mind, that'll about do it for Streets of Rage 4 here. Be sure to tune in after the break, as the Galax will be reviewing Foxyland. Well, we'll all kind of be reviewing Foxyland, but Galax is going to be the main on that.